Radburn has generations of families who pass the houses down, and they love that landscape, and so they care for it. For Radburn, the park was actually the important view from the park to the houses, not where the driveway came in, not where the cars go, that's a functional piece. So the cars could be out of view, but it also meant the stuff that happened in the driveway could be out of view of your park, of your common area, of your beautiful piece of what they would see as the natural world. We know as designers, this is as constructed as anything, but it's a piece of the natural world. And this is further emphasized by her inclusion of native plants, particularly around the edges and along the stream beds at Radburn. She got the kids to go out into the woods on nature studies and transplant native blueberries and viburnums and bring them back and plant them in and around Radburn in certain places. And for her, it was a way of empowering the children so they felt like they were part of this landscape. It was a way for them to understand how to steward the landscape. But it was also a way, and she wrote about this, it was a way, as she wrote, in 50 years when all the spaces around Radburn have been developed, these will be reminders of the meadows and woodlands that were once here. So it's also a way of, and I think of this as part of stewardship, of understanding the history, the thicker and deeper history of these sites, and her understanding of how important it was to have a sense that there was a history here, there is a narrative, there's a story, we're part of that, we've shaped this landscape, and we're part of it now too, and stewarding it is an important piece. And finally, I'll say her other inscription around stewardship that I think is important is in this little, we would call them natural areas, but again, they're planted, they're designed, they didn't just arise. She puts gazebos, or she puts some form of structure in there. And I think she does it for a couple reasons. One is to remind people these are designed. These didn't just happen here by happenstance. But also it's a way of entering them and understanding that these are sites that one wants to steward, that one appreciates, that one takes care of, that having something like a lovely gazebo in the midst of a native planting overlooking a natural stream that goes through the site, and then seeing the houses beyond and the gardens and the small children's playground. It connects the whole site together and reminds you that you're not just responsible as a community member for your own little private garden. You're part of this larger system that is your larger community and your larger landscape. Kids can walk from one end to the other where the school is now in Radburn and never cross the street. That's how much attention is paid to this town for children, which Clarence Stein writes about. It's a town safe for children, safe for families. And Cautley, in fact, shapes a landscape that can do that. I give Cautley's design huge credit for creating that kind of public-private hybrid space that allows a community to feel safe and a community to be generated and stewarded. Like Roosevelt Commons isn't just one big open space, with a few trees scattered. It actually weaves in between the various groups of houses. It has an amphitheater tucked into it. It has a croquet field, now soccer field. It actually has a swimming and community center tucked in. It has what is probably it's famous for is the underpass, which is a path for bikes and pedestrians to go under the road. That's what allows kids from sort of down the blocks to go into school and never cross a street. So it has pathways through it, it has routes through it, it has views and vistas through it. So it's a very varied landscape. And that variation comes from, I think, her spatial variation, her ability to create different spaces through topography, through plants, through trees, through the layout of the houses and the viewpoints. You have these various scaled spaces that are all defined by plants. And that's one of the incredible talents that Cautley has because of her deep knowledge of plants and in particular trees and shrubs. She is able to use plants to shape space in beautiful ways, to enclose spaces, often to enclose them even above with a canopy. There's an incredible complexity to her designs that reads as incredible simplicity. And I suppose that's why partly I think the stewardship of it is hard, because it's easy to just read it in the simplistic terms. and not understand all the complexity that went into those. You know, it reminds me of watching an incredible musician or ballet dancer, right? That they make it look so simple. Like, I can get on my toes and twirl around, sure. And then of course you try and you're like, oh, that's not so simple. And I think her landscapes can be similarly apparently simple and yet spatially varied and much more complex. She brings her daughter Patricia to Radburn while she's designing it. She brought Patricia many times to Radburn, but at one point, and Patricia recalls this in an interview I had with her, Marjorie turned to her and said, pay attention to this design. This is probably the most important work I'll ever do.